Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to episode number 83 of Paul Heyman's TNA. And we'll begin tonight with a match that was made last week, a huge 8-man tag team contest with no disqualifications. Representing Ring of Honor, it is the All Night Express, Kenny King and Reptitus, and the American Wolves, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, versus the Forefathers, Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, James Storm and Robert Roode. The brawl basically goes all around the ringside area as you would expect. Cameras struggling to keep up with all the action that's going on, but when it comes down to it, we see James Storm and Robert Roode left with Reptitus in the ring. I wanted it to be a DWI so that we get the tag team finish of Beer Money over one member of ANX, says the lung blower here. Doesn't really matter too much, and Reptitus, who was the weak link according to the game, is pinned by James Storm. Some decent performances in there. Happy with Christopher Daniels, Davey Richards, Eddie Edwards and Beer Money. The rest obviously need a little bit of work, but for different reasons. Nonetheless, it is a big win for the TNA guys, albeit with an established guy like James Storm beating an up-and-comer, a bit of a rookie in terms of our roster, Reptitus. And after the match, they stand tall, the Forefathers managing to regroup, some of them more worse for wears than the other, but they have opened up Impact following a wild and violent brawl with an impressive victory. All 4 members of the Forefathers proving they are no pushovers. They may have lost in the Lethal Lockdown, but the outside threat that is this ROH alumni group, they know that they're not just going to roll over this roster. The commentators put over how much of a fight both sides put into this match. They say whatever happens next, there is going to be a lot of bloodshed in this war between Ring of Honor and TNA. So I thought that was a really good way to kick off this episode, and 2 good segments that stand us in good stead for the rest of the show. We then get an interview with Jimmy Jacobs. It begins with the leader of the New Age having a smirk on his face, and he laughs, saying that Paul Heyman is a really smart man. Sarcastically, he praises the man in charge of TNA for his incredible idea for tonight's main event. For those that don't know, Bobby Lashley will go one-on-one with him, Jimmy Jacobs, tonight. And Jacobs says he could beg and grovel and attempt to get out of this match. Everybody knows which way it's going to go, right? But he's not going to give Bobby the satisfaction. It's fitting, given the name of the pay-per-view in 10 days' time. But Jimmy is willing to sacrifice himself, his health and his well-being for the greater good. Therefore, he looks forward to every single shot that Bobby Lashley lays into him tonight. But he has a warning for the recently returned dual sport star. He says that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and he wants Lashley to keep that in mind before stepping in the ring with him tonight. Whatever happens to Jimmy Jacobs is going to come back on Bobby Lashley, and quite possibly in an even worse way for him. We are going to give him a new gimmick. His new age gimmick is poor. He's now going to turn to visionary, which gets a great rating, so hopefully that improves his promos and segments going forward, and losses do not hurt his momentum as much as usual. That may come in handy later tonight, not to give too big of a spoiler away there. Returning to the ring, we see that another member of the New Age, Sarah Del Rey, has come down to the ring, joined by her fellow stablemates Daisy Hayes and Mischief. The Knockouts champion says that time is ticking on finding her a suitable opponent, so she's decided to take matters into her own hands. She's in action here tonight, and all she asks is for somebody that she hasn't beat before. Turning to Hayes and Mischief, she asks if that's too much to ask. Hayes shakes her head enthusiastically, while Mischief doesn't react. Del Rey challenges anybody in that locker room who hasn't had their shoulders pinned to the mat by her or been made to submit by the Queen of Wrestling to come down to the ring. After a short wait, SDR's challenger makes her entrance, and it is Daphne who lasts 8 minutes and 26, so it's a very dogged and plucky display from Daphne, showing lots of heart and lots of fight, but ultimately following a double underhook suplex, she is pinned by Sarah Del Rey. A decent match, and just further putting over how much dominance that Sarah Del Rey has over this roster. She is then joined in the ring by Daisy Hayes and Mischief after the match, and Hayes is clapping and praising the Knockouts champion. She is her biggest fan, the cheerleader of the New Age almost. While this is happening, the commentators put over Daphne for the good display that she showed against a woman who has been absolutely dominant every time she has stepped in the ring, going from good to great the New Age members are joined by their stablemate Alyssa Flash. She's been out for about a month. She comes down to the ring with a smile on her face and looks delighted to be back in the ring with her fellow New Age members. Del Rey orders Daisy Hayes to get a microphone from ringside in order to welcome Flash back into the fold. Daisy Hayes looks to hug Flash, but instead Flash asks if she can take the microphone now Sarah has said her piece. Alyssa echoes Sarah Del Rey's sentiment that it is great to be back, and she is especially happy to be surrounded by 3 women that she can trust so much. Actually, this is perfect. However, she undercuts this feel-good moment by pointing out that Sarah Del Rey has never beaten her. SDI laughs initially, but Flash is serious. She then leaves up the ramp. No more words said, but it's clear that Alyssa Flash has given the champion something to think about. Del Rey turns to Hayes and Mischief, both looking confused, but Alyssa Flash making her mark on her return. In the back, Jeremy Borash then approaches Bobby Lashley, who is seen warming up for his match with Jimmy Jacobs later tonight. Despite being the heavy favourite, Lashley isn't taking his preparation lightly. He seems to be going through all the usual warm-ups that he does. Interrupting the focus of Lashley, Jeremy Borash asks for his thoughts on tonight's main event and how he feels about this match being made. Lashley says that for once, Paul Heyman has got something right and he can't wait to get inside the 6 sides with the leader of the New Age. He is ready to cut the head off the snake tonight. But this is just the beginning, of course, because Lashley knows the Kings of Wrestling and Tyler Black, they'll be looking to get themselves involved tonight. Forget all this talk of sacrifice. He knows that the New Age hunt impacts, and that's fine by him because he is still out for revenge on the trio who broke his arm back in January, and if they want to come down and get involved tonight, he doesn't think it'll end well for them. A decent segment from Lashley as we go into the 4th match of the night, an unofficial number 1 contenders match. Of course, at Sacrifice it is going to be Roderick Strong taking his rematch against Tyler Black. In the meantime, the other guys vying for position in the X Division are put in this 4-way match. It's a solid match, Chris Sabin the best of the performers, Paul London also doing well, but it's actually Low Key who pins Chris Sabin with a Warrior's Way. During the match, we have El Generico take a dive to the outside that takes both him and Paul London out by causing them both to crash into the guardrail. It then ends up with Chris Sabin and Low Key, and even back and forth, Low Key just having enough to win the match, however, continuing his fantastic run since returning to the company at Destination X. Low Key stands tall in the ring following that fast-paced, all-action X Division style match that we're used to seeing. The more that we can get that on Impact, the more that we can showcase the talent of these guys, the better it can be. Gesturing around his waist, the World Warrior makes it clear that the X Division Championship is very much in his sights. He ends the first hour of Impact before we come back to Paul Heyman in the ring, and he brings out Austin Aries. He wants to know what this is all about. He's desperate to finally get to the bottom of this situation. Aries seems to have his gripes and his complaints, but he's never actually pointed out what he wants from Paul Heyman and TNA. If they're ever going to find a resolution, that's what he needs, and he is willing to hear out the Ring of Honor World Champion. Aries comes down to the ring and uses the example of his fellow ROH alumni, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards. 2 of the very best wrestlers in the world, signed to Ring of Honor, but shelved for the last 5 months since the buyout. Or worse, Kenny King and Reptitus, who while the ROH World Tag Team Champions were given a tryout in the opening match of an episode of TNA Evolved. Austin isn't here to get into the business of all this, but he explains that that is what made this personal for them. They were treated as low-down, entry-level guys when everybody in this business knows they are some of the best wrestlers in the world. Paul Heyman and his team were supposed to be scouring the globe for the very best wrestlers to bring to this company, so he doesn't buy that they were just overlooked in that process. He knows that there is something personal going on. However, he does know somebody who is more than happy to talk business with Paul Heyman, and he's sure they're going to get acquainted sooner rather than later. But the business that Heyman wants to discuss is the Ring of Honor World Championship. Aries wanted to prove himself, so why not prove himself against Mr. TNA AJ Styles? He is one of the biggest scalps available in this company, so why did Aries reject that challenge? Austin keeps it simple. He doesn't deserve it. What has AJ Styles done to prove himself worthy of a shot at the championship with one of the most prestigious lineages in the history of this business. Look back on the people who have held this championship. They form the foundation of this business today. That is what Ring of Honor was all about. The most deserving contenders fighting for the most prestigious prize. So finding one man on this roster with a reasonable claim to the title, and he'll sign that contract. He'll fight them at Sacrifice. So Aries, a really good segment, it has to be said. Both men improvising well, and I think this is the first time where we've had all green notes with an Aries segment. This is what we envisaged. The previous segments haven't quite hit. We've been getting in the 70s, whereas this, everything's gone to plan and we get an 84. That's what bringing Austin Aries in such a prominent role was all about, and he's done really well there, laying down what he wants from Paul Heyman. However, when we come back from the break, the commentators inform viewers of a huge incident that happened while they were away. Mauro and Taz then lead into this footage of what just went down, showing Austin Aries at the top of the ramp, having decided that he wanted to throw a few more expletive-laden insults at Paul Heyman and the rest of the TNA roster while we weren't on the air on Spike. The Ring of Honor World Champion failed to spot a man emerging from the back. The returning Samoa Joe confronted Austin Aries. When Aries realised who was behind him, the returning Samoa Joe confronted him, pointing out that they went to a 60-minute time limit draw at the ROH 9th anniversary show, and he asks if that is worthy enough for Austin Aries. Is that what he had in mind? Aries is almost put on the spot here, and Paul Heyman stokes the flames, asking Aries for his answer there and then. Austin is unwilling to back down. His ego takes over here, and he gets in Samoa Joe's face, telling him you're on. He'll see him at Sacrifice with the Ring of Honor World Championship on the line. So it's not quite as good a segment as the previous one. Realistically, this could have all been one segment, but because of the amount of text I had written in, I thought it'd be easier just to say it as a during the break thing. We have a huge title match set for Sacrifice. The fourth match of the night sees the New Age members, who may have one eye on that main event involving Jimmy Jacobs and Bobby Lashley later tonight, defeat Colt Cabana and wrestling's greatest tag team. Three guys who have had issues with the New Age, but clearly don't have that same cohesion that the trio Chris Hero, Claudio Castagnoli and Tyler Black have. And the booking here is that WGTT and the Kings of Wrestling cancel each other out, leaving Tyler Black to pin Colt Cabana following a Phoenix splash. Shelton Benjamin doing well as he so often does. Castagnoli not at the none of the New Age actually at the level that we've come to expect from them, but that's probably to do with the booking of the match and maybe its placement on the card. Great heat and good wrestling nonetheless, and I've got no doubt that those performance levels will be at the required level at Sacrifice. A professional, clean and decisive win for them, despite the unenviable position that their leader finds himself in. The Kings of Wrestling and Tyler Black don't hang around for long after their victory, but we're seeing here that maybe some other teams, some other competitors, they may have had their game plan thrown off by the fact that there's a main event to prepare for and presumably some sort of plan in place for them. But these guys are professional and they know exactly what their job is. During the match and in the aftermath, the commentators are of course putting over this huge main event that we have. Elsewhere in the back, El Generico is shown walking away from a monitor after watching his friend and partner Colt Cabana's defeat in that previous match. The masked luchador is then confronted by Paul, who asks him what the hell that was during the match. What was he thinking? He dived on London to the outside and took them both out of contention. That was a stupid decision from El Generico, and it cost both of them. Unable to speak English, El Generico is confused by the issue, but London repeats himself, "What the hell were you thinking?" London continues to look to intimidate Generico. He's clearly very pissed off about this, and Generico cowers away, looking to avoid any confrontation. Before this goes any further, Colt Cabana returns to the locker room post-match. He's not in the best condition, but he asks what's happening. Generico looks to London, who threatens him to keep out of his way going forward. As London leaves, he repeats the same threat towards Colt Cabana, pushing Cabana out of the way. So going back a little bit to that bitter veteran gimmick that Paul London had earlier in 2010, and really, without Brian Kendrick, we do need him to establish more of a character on his own. We then get an interview with Desmond Wolfe. It's not the best, but he is spoken to by Mike Tenay in a sit-down interview, asking his thoughts about Bryan Danielson challenging Abyss to a Monsters Ball. as well as the partnership, friendship, whatever it is that Wolfe seems to be trying to create between himself and Bryan Danielson, despite their history of absolutely despising one another and Bryan's unwillingness. Wolfe says that Bryan Danielson is his own man, and he respects that. If he thinks that fighting Abyss at his own game is what he needs to do to get over whatever issue he's having, he can't stop him. He can, however, warn him that it is a bad idea. He hopes that Danielson understands what is waiting for him if Mitchell accepts his challenge to the Monsters Ball. In regards to the team, Wolfe talks about their years as rivals and opponents, but after final resolution, they both agreed that they wouldn't face off again. With the knowledge of each other's game and the natural chemistry that they found when they teamed up a few months ago, he thinks that they are capable of doing something special together. This isn't something personal. This is business. He doesn't want to see that wasted, but reiterates the ball is in Bryan Danielson's court. The fourth match of the night sees Sarita defeat Jazz. This is a match that was supposed to happen on last week's TNA Evolve. Basically, I'd booked 4 matches by mistake instead of 3. I've moved it to Impact. Sarita defeats Jazz in 5 minutes and 53 with a flying crossbody. Not much more to say other than that. Sarita standing tall, having picked up a victory, and hopefully we can start to see her build some momentum now, because she's been very much lost in the shuffle since the end of her team with Taylor Wilde. We then get the response from Father James Mitchell. The first thing that the father of the monster has to say is that he retracts his statement that the American Dragon is a smart man. Agreeing to face Abyss is one thing, but suggesting to fight him in a monster's ball shows a reckless disregard for one's own well-being. There is a fine line between genius and insanity, and Bryan Danielson has very much crossed that line. James Mitchell says that Abyss is offended by Bryan's challenge, so unlike Jay Lethal, it isn't just his career that the monster is going to destroy. And there are plenty other members of the TNA roster that Bryan can learn this lesson from. Abyss has dominated this promotion for almost a decade, and it's been almost 2 years since anybody pinned his son. The only time that Abyss has been defeated was against the world champion Kurt Angle, and while he may have put Abyss down for the 10 count, he doesn't believe that Bryan has a chance of even getting the 1, 2, 3. A confident promo from James Mitchell there, the key being that he has accepted the challenge. A Monsters Ball will take place at Sacrifice between Bryan Danielson and the monster himself, Abyss. We then get the main event, an extremely short match. 55. Right, this could be one of the worst impacts that we've done in a very, very long time. I suppose it's on me, I've only got myself to blame, but Bobby Lashley defeats Jimmy Jacobs in 5 minutes and 6 seconds by pinfall with a spear. The interesting thing, or the strange thing I suppose, no members of the New Age come out at all. No Tyler Black, no Claudio Castagnoli, no Chris Hero. Jimmy Jacobs is just left for more than 5 minutes to be thrown around the ring, beaten up and destroyed by Jimmy Jacobs, and that really is how the match goes. Not a single bit of offense for Jimmy Jacobs, and essentially once Jimmy Jacobs is down and out, Bobby Lashley hits a spear and ends it, probably only putting a finger on Jimmy Jacobs because he sure as hell doesn't need to give him a proper pinfall. A complete one-sided squash. Maybe not a match good enough to be the main event of Impact, but I kind of feel like if this was done in reality, it wouldn't matter because A, you'd have the hype of seeing Bobby Lashley destroying Jimmy Jacobs. It's not like anybody's coming into this expecting a competitive match. It's about the spectacle of seeing what Lashley can do to this prick Jimmy Jacobs, basically, who has spent a year and a half not really getting his comeuppance all that often. The fact that he gets a poor rating in the game is disappointing because it does mean that we probably will lose popularity with this show, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not that bothered about it. After the match, Bobby Lashley stands tall over the leader of the New Age, who he has beaten, as I said, from pillar to post in a dominant display. Lashley looks confused that neither the Kings of Wrestling nor Tyler Black came to the aid of their leader. Throughout the match, even when he was beating Jimmy Jacobs, he kind of had one eye on the entranceway, expecting something to happen, and he still expects an attack after the match. Things eventually become clear, however, with the greater good that Jacob spoke about in regards to his sacrifice earlier. We see how that plays out on the big screen. In the back, a beaten and bloodied Kurt Angle is shown down and out in his locker room, his head being held up by Tyler Black. The Kings of Wrestling are either side of the World Heavyweight Champion, and we see that while Bobby Lashley was busy in the ring, they decided that their best tactic was to be find and isolate Kurt Angle, and he of course stood no chance against these three men. Lashley runs to the back looking to find them, and it's probably too late to help Kurt Angle, but he's clearly fired up and wants that revenge. Left in the ring, slumped in the corner, his head on the turnbuckle, he's barely conscious, but Jimmy Jacobs, the last face we see as Impact comes to a close. It's been long enough that he is now conscious after the match, and we see the final shot is him smirking despite being destroyed in the ring. He's happy because that equal and opposite reaction that he spoke of has been immediately enacted by the New Age, with Kurt Angle potentially in just as much pain after a 3-on-1 assault from the New Age. A 68 would have been nice for it to sneak into the 70s, but after a 55 main event, I was worried we'd be looking at low to mid 60s, so not too bad there. Still increasing our popularity in 9 regions, losing it in 11, which of course is never good, but we immediately have the chance to rectify that now by going into TNA Evolve, and the main event that I've got planned for that show I think is going to be quite a bit better than the main event of this one. And Evolve begins with that final segment that we just saw, but up next we will get the reaction of Paul Heyman to this, and he comes out and calls out the New Age to come to the ring. He's told Kurt Angle and Bobby Lashley not to be here tonight because Paul Heyman needs to settle this the right way. He tells the New Age that he has booked a match for Sacrifice since we have the Ring of Honor World Championship being defended. He's happy to leave the World Heavyweight Championship for Slammiversary. Therefore, at Sacrifice, it will be Bobby Lashley, Kurt Angle against the Kings of Wrestling. This has been a very personal rivalry, so I don't think we need the titles involved necessarily, but I think that with how good the Kings of Wrestling have been, they deserve this big pay-per-view showcase match, and they'll get that against Lashley and Kurt Angle. Paul Heyman in this excellent promo, a 95 rating, almost ensures us a really good overall rating for the show just off the one segment. He adds that this match will be an unsanctioned fight. They broke Bobby Lashley's arm. They have targeted the World Heavyweight Champion since they first arrived in the company, so he doesn't want TNA to be responsible for what happens next Sunday at Sacrifice. All he knows is that it is going to be a bloodbath, and he hopes Jimmy Jacobs is happy with that. Roderick Strong then defeats Nick Jackson in 9 minutes and 44 with a sick kick, despite all of Sweet and Sour being at ringside. In fact, you could say that this helps him, because when Matt Jackson tries to cheat to help his brother, Okada stops him. This leads to a huge argument on the outside, and maybe Nick Jackson is slightly distracted by this as he is decisively defeated by Roderick Strong. He'll face Tyler Black for the X Division Championship at Sacrifice, but the focus after the match is on Sweet and Sour. Nick Jackson still down in the ring. Matt Jackson and Okada almost looking like they're going to get physical. 2 members of Sweet and Sour. Sweeney's trying to calm them down, and Matt Jackson, instead of kicking Okada, super kicks Yoshihashi, laying him out. Okada checks on him as Nick, Matt and Larry Sweeney leave up the ramp. Once at the top of the ramp, Larry Sweeney tells Okada that he has a choice to make. It's either Yoshihashi or Sweet and Sour. Okada is on excursion with the company, remember, 18 months from the start of the game, so we've not got long left with Kazuchika Okada, and we want to at least give him something of a send-off as he comes into his last few months with the company. No need to do the turn just yet though, because of course, as we've said, we've set up there Larry Sweeney giving Okada that choice to make, and we'll see which way he goes. AJ Styles is then asked about Eddie Edwards tonight, and he puts over one half of the American Wolves, saying that nobody can doubt the talent that Eddie Edwards has, but it's just his attitude, and the fact that he stands between AJ Styles and his goals means that it's not going to go well for Edwards in our main event. A really good match that I'm very much looking forward to. Bryan Danielson in a decent match, he puts in a good display, absolutely squashing and destroying this local talent, Bruce Santee. I should have changed his picture by now. He shaved his head last week. We've had him grow out his facial hair. I'll put that on screen, of course, but that fresh-faced Bryan Danielson is not the one we see going from the opening bell, taking Bruce Santee down, kicking his head in. Very relevant to what he's doing in AEW at the minute, but of course it was a big part of his character all these years ago. He then transitions into a cattle mutilation, the referee quickly realising this guy is already out, and Bryan Danielson wins in 42 seconds. A brutal, violent and decisive dominant win for him. He is then asked by SoCal Val The question everybody's been asking, why did he challenge Abyss to the Monsters Ball? And he says that he has to put Abyss down. He will put Abyss down. He is so single-minded, so focused on this match at Sacrifice, where he will face the monster Abyss. We then get a promo from Homicide, who's alongside Hernandez, giving an update on Amazing Red, who was taken out by Kevin Steen on last week's episode of Impact. A package piledriver on the apron means that Red isn't currently available to compete. However, Homicide is, and he wants to take Kevin Steen down. He challenges him to a match. We then get a poor segment, Love and Mickie James not doing well when going off script, but the idea here is that Tara is the guest on the Beautiful People show. The facade that all three women are putting on is very clear. They obviously dislike each other from everything we've seen over the past 17 months, but there's this idea here that they're all trying to pretend that they're the best of friends so that they can all individually put down Mickie James and claim that everything that Tara is saying about her is absolutely true. Everybody in the Knockouts locker room agrees. Mickie James cannot listen to this. She comes out, she's furious. She wants to fight Tara, knowing that she's in a 3-on-1 situation. She takes a little while to hype herself up. Luckily, she finds backup from Hamada and Taylor Wilde, who themselves have issues with the Beautiful People. They come down, a brawl breaks out, Angelina, Velvet and Tara managing to escape and get away, but it's clear that Mickie, Hamada and Wilde have got the better of the exchange. Coming back from the break, and what a way to end this show. This is going to be one of the best shows we've done. AJ Styles defeats Eddie Edwards in 13 minutes and 23 when Eddie Edwards is disqualified due to the involvement of Davey Richards. AJ Styles is going for the phenomenal forearm. Richards grabs his leg, pulls him off the apron, throws him into the steel steps. He then rolls AJ into the ring after the attack has gone down, and the American Wolves begin to beat down AJ Styles. He, however, finds a saviour in the form of Beer Money, who run off the American Wolves. They then look to help AJ Styles back to his feet after the match. Again, these guys certainly can't be described as friends, but when it comes to this Ring of Honor versus TNA situation, the loyalty to their home company is coming through week after week, and 83 is a really good overall show rating. Of course, Heyman to thank for that opening segment, but also AJ Styles and Eddie Edwards with a really good main event, and that's with an unclean finish. So eventually, when AJ Styles and Eddie Edwards down the line have a match with a clean, decisive finish, who knows what they will be capable of. Really encouraging when you consider that Eddie Edwards hasn't been in the company for very long at all, and we haven't had the chance to properly build up his momentum. Increasing our popularity in 11 regions, and that is another week of TNA done. I'm really happy with how things are going, excited for this build to Sacrifice. We are doing things a little bit differently with having the Ring of Honor Championship defended while the TNA World Heavyweight Championship isn't, but with Slammiversary coming up, I think it's not going to be too much of a problem that you have a longer build to what is going to be our Slammiversary main event. Really looking forward to what we have in store, and hopefully it is coming across well. Sacrifice coming up in 10 days time. Before then, we of course have another week of Impact and Evolve. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back next time.